Hi, my name is Jim Hessler, and I'm a licensed battlefield guide here at Gettysburg National Military Park. I've been a battlefield guide since about 2003. I'm an author or co-author of 3 books, and my dear old friend Eric Wittenberg has asked me to work with you today and give you a battlefield tour on Longstreet's assault, July 2nd, 1863. Now, I wish you were here. I wish you were here with us today, but of course, because of COVID, we are going to be Zooming Longstreet's assault. So we've got a lot of ground to cover over the next 3.5 to 4 hours or so, and I'm glad you're with us, and we hope we can get started and have a good day out here. We're coming to your first stop from Robert E. Lee's headquarters at the Mary Thompson House near Seminary Ridge. You might hear some background traffic noise from the Chambersburg Pike, which is off to my right or basically behind the camera right now. We're going to just do a quick setup before we get into the action of July 2nd, 1863. Probably most of you know that on July 1st, fighting occurred out here west of town, north of town, basically considered a Confederate tactical victory as Union forces were driven back to Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge, which are east and south of the town of Gettysburg. Lee got up here late afternoon of July 1st, and on the Chambersburg Pike behind us, James Longstreet's First Corps would have started to arrive on the field early on the morning of July 2nd. Lee and Longstreet were starting to plan their attack for the 2nd, figure out what they wanted to do. Now, Robert E. Lee says in his report that encouraged by the successful issue of the engagement of the first day, and in view of valuable results that would ensue from the defeat of General Meade's army, it was thought advisable to renew the attack. So that was basically, in a nutshell, the reason why Robert E. Lee decided to attack on July 2nd. The real question as it developed was going to be where to attack. Do we hit the Union right flank? Do we hit Cemetery Hill, or do we go around and hit the Union left flank? As probably most of you know, James Longstreet, who is going to be one of our principal protagonists today, James Longstreet was not happy with the idea of attacking here at Gettysburg and tried to talk General Lee out of making the attack and instead working around south towards Maryland. That didn't happen, though. Lee was committed to fighting here, basically shook his fist at Cemetery Hill and told Longstreet that those people are here and we are going to attack them here. So that is going to set the stage for July 2nd. Now, what we're going to do as we start to move on here is we're going to examine the Union line, and we're going to kind of see how Lee and Longstreet's plans come together through the morning hours. So next stop will be around the North Carolina Monument on Seminary Ridge, and we'll be there in a few minutes for you. Okay, so we're making our first stop here at the North Carolina State Memorial on West Confederate Avenue. The memorial is actually right behind the camera right now, but what we really wanted to show you is what's behind me as we start to talk about Lee and Longstreet's planning for July 2nd, the July 2nd attack. I would argue when I bring people out here, or when I write, or when I speak about the second day attack, Lee's plan of attack on July 2nd is still one of the most confusing aspects of the entire day. And so, from one of the things that I want to try to accomplish today is to try to get inside Lee and Longstreet's head to the best we can so that hopefully you guys can better understand what the hell these guys were trying to accomplish during the combat of the second day. Okay, so pan over here. We can see the Round Tops on the horizon. Big Round Top is the biggest wooded hill on the southern end of the Cemetery Ridge, which is about a mile or so away from us. Big Round Top was heavily wooded during the battle, like it is today. Then you can then see to our left the smaller summit of Little Round Top. Now, we're out here for you guys. It's like 8:30 on a Sunday morning, so the mist is still kind of on the field here. Kind of a nice image, but hopefully even through the mist in the camera, you can get a view of the open summit of Little Round Top. And then pan over this way. You see the long, flat slope of Cemetery Ridge. If you've got good eyes, maybe you can make out a car driving right now. That is along the Emmitsburg Road. Emmitsburg Road is very critical to understanding the plan of attack today. And then pan the camera a little bit up towards the north here, towards the houses, and what you would be looking at in that direction would be the western slope of Cemetery Hill. Now, obviously, in 1863, none of these houses were here, but these trees were not here either. So what Lee, Longstreet, their staff, and the Confederate soldiers would have been looking at would have been more of the open slope of West Cemetery Hill. And by the evening of July 1st, morning of July 2nd, the slope of Cemetery Hill would have already been crowned with Federal artillery. If you're Robert E. Lee, if you're James Longstreet, are you going to launch a frontal assault on a heavily fortified Cemetery Hill? I don't think so. So what Lee and Longstreet are doing, and the other subordinates, is they're looking for an alternative. Now, Lee briefly considered making an attack over what would be the Confederate left or the Union right in the area of Culp's Hill, East Cemetery Hill. But Richard Ewell, Jubal Early, some of the officers of the Confederate Second Corps essentially talked Lee out of making an attack in that direction. They did, however, convince Lee to leave Ewell opposite Culp's Hill. And although Culp's Hill is primarily a battlefield tour for another time, it is going to play into the strategy that Lee is thinking of doing today on July 2nd. Okay, so as we pan the camera back towards Cemetery Ridge, George Meade and the Army of the Potomac's position on the morning of July 2nd would have been stretching from Cemetery Hill down along Cemetery Ridge. Immediately in front of me is the famous copse of trees, which would become the landmark on the July 3rd attack. But down Cemetery Ridge, you can see an obelisk on the horizon that is the U.S. Regulars Monument. And as you continue to work your way south, you can then see the dome on the horizon of the Pennsylvania State Monument. So that front that we just looked at on July 2nd would have been primarily starting to fill in the morning hours by Winfield Hancock's Union Army Second Corps. But beyond the Pennsylvania Monument, and then you see the red barn, black roof with 3 white steeples, that's the Cadore Farm. Beyond the Pennsylvania Monument and the Cadore Farm, Cemetery Ridge kind of drops below the Emmitsburg Road Ridge, which runs in between our ridge and Cemetery Ridge. So you've got kind of this Emmitsburg Road that kind of blocks the view of Union troops on the southern end of Cemetery Ridge. In a nutshell, Lee, Longstreet, and the Confederates probably could not see any Union troops positioned much beyond where the Cadore property is today. Now, on the Union side, the left flank, stretching up towards Little Round Top, was supposed to be occupied by the Union Army Third Corps under lovable but controversial Union General Dan Sickles, a man who is very dear to my heart, as probably many of you know. Sickles was supposed to be defending the left flank of the Union position, and according to the verbal orders that he was given by George Meade, Sickles should have stretched his Third Corps at least toward and onto Little Round Top. But as many of us know, and we'll talk about during the course of the day, that doesn't happen. Okay, so what I'm really trying to get at you guys here right now is that Lee and Longstreet cannot see Union infantry on the Union left flank, and quite frankly, don't know where the Union left flank is. So Lee is going to order a number of reconnaissances during the morning of July 2nd. The most famous one and the most noteworthy one is going to be led by a staff officer by the name of Captain Johnston. Captain Johnston is going to do a reconnaissance of the Union position somewhere out towards the Round Tops. We're not 100% sure today where exactly Johnston got, and for our intents and purposes today, where Johnston got is not as important as what he tells Lee, because when Johnston comes back from his reconnaissance, he goes back up Seminary Ridge, he finds Lee and Longstreet still planning at Lee's headquarters, or around Lee's headquarters, maybe near the seminary, but Johnston comes back to Lee and basically tells him that the Union left does not stretch as far as the Round Tops. Okay, as far as reconnaissance goes, at that hour of the morning, Johnston's intelligence was kind of correct. There were no Union infantry on Little Round Top at that point. But Johnston's report convinces Lee that the Union left is short somewhere on Cemetery Ridge, maybe even on the Emmitsburg Road itself. And now that's going to help formulate in Robert E. Lee's mind that we are going to launch our main attack against the Union left. Longstreet, who doesn't like the idea and is supposedly increasingly failing to conceal some anger as all of this is coming together, Longstreet is going to basically lead the main attack against the Union left, which he is going to have to locate and drive in, while on our front, along Seminary Ridge, near where we are, A.P. Hill is going to cooperate in the center, and then opposite Culp's Hill, Richard Ewell is going to demonstrate and convert it into a real attack if the opportunity should offer. Okay, so did you get that? Longstreet is the main attack. Hill is to cooperate. Ewell is to demonstrate and turn that into a real attack. All of this based on a premise where the Confederates don't really, though, know or understand where the Union left flank is. And that's going to contribute to a lot of the coordination, communication issues, and frankly, just a lot of the blood and guts that we're going to see as the fighting begins in the afternoon of the 2nd.